All right, our next presenters are joining us from New Zealand and Australia. Um, yeah, we have our, and also it's quite early for you there. Thank you for joining us. We have. I see that both Simon and Jules are there. The paper is under is Simon Twose, Jules Moloney, Lawrence Harvey, and Anastasia Globa. Simon Twose is joining us from New Zealand. He's at the School of Architecture Te Renga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. And Jules Moloney is joining us from Australia. He's at the School of Architecture, Design and Planning at the University of Sydney. Welcome. Is everything under control in the Zoom? I see Carol is there, so I think she... You can hear us.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, great. So all go. Shall I go? Yeah.
I'm cut off. So
cool. I will share my screen. Hold on a second. Is that coming up?
Yep.
Is that perfect. All good?
Yep, all good.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Hello from the other side of the world, Aotearoa. Today I'd like to show you some ongoing work exploring multimodal drawing. It's a series of work that's part of a collaboration between me, Jules Moloney, Lawrence Harvey, and Anastasia Globa. The work explores how unfixed, intangible conditions can be sketched through analog, VR, AR, and sonic sketches. Has that gone black? Hang on, for some reason, I'll just see if they... Hang on, sorry. Technical hitch. What's happening here? Oh, I see, right. Oh, I know what I've done. Okay, all right. Righto. So we're doing projects that are trying to capture a strange kind of architecture that hovers at the cusp of awareness and kind of escapes representation. And the project started with this place, which is Kaikoura, which is on the east coast of Te Waiponamu and Aotearoa, which is South Island of Aotearoa. And basically, it's my hometown, but it's this amazing place that had an incredible earthquake in 2016, 7.8 magnitude earthquake. And everything rose, the mountains, the seabed, even our little house, which sort of shuttered up 2 meters in 120 seconds. Some parts of the coast rose 6 meters in a split second. And so it's an incredibly dynamic, seismic landscape. And we were really interested in how you could kind of sketch invisible things like the kind of strange atmosphere that has come about after this event. And so we set about kind of working through how this might be captured as architectural drawings. So the site itself, that's where the reef is, just on the edge of the Kaikoura Peninsula. So the site is part of this huge bathymetric landscape which drops down from into the canyon and then flows out to the Hikarangi Trench and then out to the Pacific Plateau, which is basically the edge of the Zealandia continent. So it's part of a vast landscape system, which is at continental scale, planetary scale. And the presence of that is kind of evident when you're in Kaikoura. It's strangely evident. So this this space is kind of understood through multiple scientific methods, multi-beam scanning and undersea drones and all sorts of things like that. So it's a really scientifically studied, mapped environment, and it's incredibly dynamic. It's full of turbid flows of rocks and sediment and really complex ecologies. It has undersea eruptions, all sorts of really interesting dynamics, right? And so we're really interested in how this how this space could be drawn, how it could be inhabited, how it's both it has an atmosphere of oceanic immensity, seismic latency, but it's a space which is basically water, a mass of water which you can't inhabit, and how you might imaginatively inhabit that through architectural drawing. So obviously the first step is to simply put a section through it, which gives you this kind of amazing plunging bathymetry. Basically 500 meters away from the shore, the seabed drops to 1 kilometer deep. And so you're really conscious of that when you're in a small boat, even on a calm sea. The immensity of the water beneath you is very kind of palpable, as well as the kind of seismic latency of the whole environment. And so sketching this in different sketches, or this is one of them, it starts to become a kind of sketch made of multiple lines that pick up smudges and blurrings that begin to kind of talk about the imagination of something which is not necessarily easily representable, not something physical. Things like pressures and flows, characteristics of all sorts of kind of invisible dynamics which are below the sea's surface. So it's like using drawing to investigate this space which is basically uninhabitable bodily. And so picking up the kind of dynamics of eruptions, movement, and all sorts of material kind of conditions which are below the sea surface, including the kind of jolts that might occur in seismic kind of events. So these drawings, a whole bunch of these drawings were made analog drawings which were then interpreted and extended by Lawrence Harvey in sound sketches. So Lawrence created soundscapes, kind of trying to draw from the sense of these sketches and create sort of sonic sketches with granularity and strange ambiguity. The sketches were also put into VR, and it was this a kind of inhabitable VR environment, a sketch environment created. So this was a kind of a way of bringing VR as a medium, as a material, into the sketch to try and explore the intangible characteristics of what we were observing in the environment. And these media, the hand drawn and the sound and the VR were kind of associated with the physical installation, which was basically a 40-meter black tar paper drawing, which was, if you like, hand sketched physically in the space, and it completely filled the space as a sort of oceanic sketch. So the work extended to look at where the canyon actually emerged from the water in the reef. And so there's a whole bunch of observations that happened with the looking at the reef in terms of its materiality at different scales. It became clear that the materiality of the reef kind of started to speak of sort of other scales, the scales of planetary matter and dynamic motion. So we again looked at sound recordings, and the sketches were extended into a whole bunch of matter sketches, which started through latex molds of parts of the reef. So a number of these were made, and they started to become their own kind of miniature landscapes in their own right. And there's a whole series, some 450 in total, that began to kind of experiment with how this ambiguous scale and strange atmosphere could be captured in a sketch made through a casting of the reef material. There's a whole bunch of these things done in concrete and wax. There are several different mold materials used. Some were quite watery, like the plastic, which were ways of sketching the sort of bathymetric landscapes. And they were kind of cast one on top of the other and became a kind of little reef environment of different elements. And they had this same kind of sketchy, blurry, broken characteristic, that sort of characteristic you get from a analog sketch that's coming through in 3 dimensions. Some of the little objects, the matter sketches, were the drawings, which had been returned to the reef and then cast in concrete as well, and things like reef crevices and things like that. And these became a sort of like hybrid of the casting process and the hand-drawn graphite sketches. So these 450 sketches were arrayed in Sydney in the Tin Sheds Gallery, and the idea was to have these as sort of pixels in a larger sketch, which kind of floated through the gallery. So the sketches, the small matter sketches themselves, became, I guess, their own reef, their own sketch that floated right through the gallery. There's some shots of some of them. So they became a kind of a navigable sketch where you could walk through following lines of ideation, lines of testing, lines of kind of thinking through these matter sketches. There's also an AR component to the exhibition where the sketches could be extended through looking at the little objects and extending them in AR through tablets. And there was also the VR environment where the abstract world could be inhabited. So I just want to show you one other project which is part of this series, which was looking at the atmospheres of fire and its aftermath, particularly with the Black Summer bushfires in Australia, which we looked at immediately after we installed the reef project. This is a short. Hey, so we're really interested in how drawings can be a kind of an imaginative portal that connects the matter of the drawing and the materiality of the subject matter and kind of merges them together. And we're also interested in how this material can be sort of sensorial through sonic sketches in that are three-dimensionalized. And so you have sort of multiple multi-sensory kind of inputs to the sketch, including virtual matter, which gives us the opportunity to extend the kind of open characteristic of the sketch to something which is inhabitable in a virtual environment. And so we're really interested in how multiple modes like this can be brought together in things like installations where the drawing space and the space of the subject matter can be sort of brought together and made bodily appreciable. So we're interested in these projects, we're interested in how kind of matter pushes back and how space is made together by drawing and its subject matter in sort of collusion. And we're interested in how this might distill an architecture that hovers just out of reach of representation, like in a crude sketch, I guess. And how this might sort of coalesce as an architecture. Thank you. That's it. Sorry about the sound.
It was fixed, and you gave us a moment of silence, actually, in one of our first. Are there questions or commentary for Simon and Jules? Is that a question in the, or is it the chat from earlier? It's a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Vas-y, Cara.
Thank you, Simon, for your presentation. I do have a question. I was curious about the installation of floating objects that you showed. Were they arranged in space in relation to the existing topography you documented, to a drawing you made based on the topography, or did they have their own kind of topographical reality? And that's my first question. And the second one is the materiality of the ground, the burning and churning is very impressive in your process. And I wonder how it translates into the digital or the VR pieces that you briefly mentioned.
Yeah. The first question, the objects in the space of the gallery, basically they recorded all of the process of examining the reef through sketches. And so you had different lines of investigation which happened with different ways of manipulating molds, different materials, a whole bunch of different sort of interactions. So it was kind of like thinking about that intangible space that was the reef through a whole bunch of different experiments and then arraying those experiments in space such that a viewer to the installation could actually navigate them. And so there were things like, some of them were in lines of experiments, sequences. Some of them actually spiraled around as sort of eddies, if you like, where you have sort of a whole bunch of things that sort of repeated. And people would navigate the installation and kind of get stuck in these eddies or follow lines of investigation. But so it wasn't a representation of the reef, it was almost like a sketch record of all of the experiments that happened. In terms of your other part of your question.
Yeah, I can speak to that if you like, Simon.
Oh,
yeah, so thanks for the question. it's quite challenging, but the way in which we approached it was to work from the drawings. So we scanned in Simon's drawings as base material, and then they were kind of applied as surfaces or interpreted through the various parameters of the reasonably sophisticated software we use. So, but the whole point of it was not to represent the drawing, but to take the character that was in the sketches and use that to procedurally manipulate, kind of the I won't call them worlds because it's motion graphics and sound. But the way we set it up is that the movement of the body in the virtual space triggered multiple kind of parameters. So you never had the same experience twice. So we were trying to achieve a situation where you were bodily drawing through VR, if that makes sense.
In the Zoom by Elif. Elif, would you like to ask your question by unmuting?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for the presentation, Simon. Your research and drawings are really inspiring. I want to ask about the relationship between the drawings and the form of natures. We see a creative translation between drawings and the various forms of nature. Do you only take nature as a source for drawings, or is there some other theoretical affinity you are associated with? I want to ask. Thank you.
I'm not sure I heard all of that really. You're asking. You're asking about what the theoretical connection to nature.
I want to ask that there is so many landscapes you use, but they are just for the drawings itself, or you are connect with the nature or landscape or fire in some kind of, I don't know, maybe anthropocenic thinking.
I see. Yeah.
What is in your mind? I wonder that.
Yeah, I mean that we have kind of explored how to think through these as in terms of the sort of Anthropocene, in terms of them being drawings being poetic, but then these drawings being sympoietic, in other words, being made together by natural phenomena in concert with human action. And so the idea is that the natural phenomena starts to have more of a voice, and the voice of that comes through and is kind of paralleled by the voice of materials that might occur in a sketch, for instance. Like in traditional, the materiality of the graphite on paper has a sort of an impact and a feedback. We're trying to extend that by actually using almost like using the natural materiality of the reef. And so it becomes a kind of, with a sympoietic idea, that comes the idea of the natural becomes highly meshed with the human, and there's a sort of a complex interaction between the two. And the overarching kind of a sort of ethical political characteristic is that it critiques our kind of intervention with the natural in a way, and almost like tries to draw out a spatiality from the natural that we don't expect. And so that's this kind of whole project for kind of investigating this sort of intangible world where we don't actually fully understand. We can never fully understand because it is between us and something that's not us. So it's in that sort of symbiotic kind of characteristic. Probably didn't answer that question necessarily, but it's within that area.
Thank you, Simon. we unfortunately have to move on, but thank you so much for joining us from so far away and at such an early time. And you are, of course, you can stay with us tomorrow. The Zoom will stay open, and hopefully we still have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.